You have been looking at that shaded corner of your garden as a problem. The spot behind the fence, the strip under the tree, the north-facing bed that never gets direct sun. You've walked past it every season, assumed nothing would grow there, and left it empty. What if I told you that corner is not your garden's weakness? What if I told you it's your most underused growing space and that you've been ignoring it for years while gardeners who know what I'm about to tell you are harvesting food from it all season long? Today, I'm giving you 10 vegetables that don't just tolerate shade, they prefer it. They produce more, taste better, and last longer in lower light conditions than they ever would baking in full afternoon sun. Stay through all 10 because plant number 4 is the one that actually improves in flavor the more shade you give it. Plant number 7 can feed you from a single planting for up to 5 years. And plant number 10 is the one that's been quietly thriving in shaded gardens for centuries, while the rest of us planted it in the wrong spot entirely. Let's start. Vegetable 1, lettuce. The crop that full sun is actively ruining. Most gardeners grow lettuce in full sun because that's what the seed packets has to do, and then they spend the entire summer fighting the same two problems: bolting and bitterness. The moment temperatures rise and sun intensity peaks, lettuce shifts from leafy food production into survival and reproduction mode. It sends up a tall central stalk. The leaves turn intensely bitter, and the entire plant becomes inedible within days of that trigger happening. Here is the thing nobody puts on the seed packet. Shade delays that process significantly. Lettuce grown in partial shade, 2 to 4 hours of direct sun rather than 6 or more, stays in its leafy, harvestable state weeks longer than sun-grown lettuce. The reduced light intensity keeps soil temperatures lower, which is the primary trigger for bolting. Lower soil temperature equals slower bolting. Slower bolting equals a longer harvest window. A longer harvest window means more food from fewer plants. In practical terms, this means that the shadiest spot in your garden, the one you wrote off, can actually extend your lettuce season by 3 to 5 weeks compared to the sunniest bed. In climates where summer arrives fast and hot, that difference is the difference between harvesting lettuce and replacing it with a bolt-resistant annual. The varieties that perform best in shade: loose leaf types, red oak leaf, green salad bowl, and butter lettuces. These are cut-and-come-again varieties. You harvest outer leaves continuously and the plant keeps producing from the center. No replanting, no full removal. 2 to 4 hours of morning light is ideal. Afternoon shade is even better. Morning sun is gentler and carries less heat than afternoon sun. The mistake most people make: giving up on lettuce in summer entirely. Don't. Just move it to the shade. Vegetable 2, spinach. More productive in shade than you were ever told. Spinach and lettuce share the same core weakness. Heat and direct sun trigger bolting faster than almost any other vegetable. But spinach has an additional trait that makes it even better suited to shade than lettuce: dark green leaves. Spinach evolved to photosynthesize efficiently at low light levels. The deep green pigmentation means it captures available light more effectively than lighter-leaved crops. In practical terms, spinach can produce satisfactorily in as little as 3 hours of indirect light per day, making it one of the most genuinely shade-adapted food crops available to the home gardener. Grown in shade, spinach stays sweeter and more tender longer into the season. Full sun produces fast initial growth, yes, but the leaves become more fibrous and develop a stronger, sometimes metallic edge as heat builds. Shade-grown spinach tastes better, not marginally, noticeably. The practical approach: grow spinach in your shadiest bed as a spring crop before deciduous trees fully leaf out. As tree canopy thickens through late spring, the shade deepens, but by then temperatures are rising, and that increasing shade is exactly what extends your harvest season rather than ending it. Sow directly, thin to 6 inches apart. Harvest outer leaves continuously. Let the plant keep producing from its center as long as conditions allow. Vegetable 3, kale. The cut-and-come-again powerhouse that shade makes better. Kale in full sun produces fast, vigorous growth. Kale in partial shade does something more interesting. It concentrates. Lower light intensity slows the plant's overall metabolic rate slightly, and as it does, the plant invests more energy into the compounds that give kale its nutritional density. Anthocyanins, the pigments responsible for the deep purple and blue-green coloring in varieties like Red Russian and Lacinato, increase in shade conditions. More anthocyanins means deeper color, stronger antioxidant content, and this is the part most gardeners notice first: sweeter, more complex flavor. Full sun kale in midsummer can turn tough and bitter. Partial shade kale in the same conditions stays milder and more palatable, which means it gets eaten more readily. Kale needs a minimum of 3 to 4 hours of light to produce well. It cannot thrive in deep, full shade the way lettuce can.
but dappled light, north-facing beds with open sky above, or spaces that receive morning sun and afternoon shade are all productive environments. And because kale is a cut-and-come-again crop, harvested leaf by leaf from the outside of the plant inward, it produces continuously over a long season from late summer planting right through winter in mild climates, or from spring through early summer in cold zones. The longer growing window that shade provides makes kale one of the highest yield crops on this list per square foot over an entire season. Vegetable 4. Arugula. The vegetable that shade genuinely improves and sun actively ruins. This is the plant I promised you in the opening, the one that actually improves in flavor the more shade you give it. Here's the mechanism. Arugula's distinctive peppery, slightly bitter bite comes from compounds called glucosinolates, the same family of compounds responsible for the pungency of mustard and horseradish. In full sun and heat, arugula produces these compounds rapidly and intensely. Within weeks of warm, bright conditions, the flavor shifts from pleasantly peppery to aggressively bitter, often to the point where people stop eating it. In shade, glucosinolate development is slower and more controlled. The result is arugula with a balanced, genuinely pleasant pepper note, the flavor that makes it the preferred salad green across Italian cuisine, rather than the harsh, overpowering bite that makes full sun summer arugula nearly inedible. Shade doesn't just tolerate arugula, it produces better arugula. This is not a compromise, it is the correct growing condition for this crop if flavor is the goal. Additionally, shade dramatically slows bolting, the point at which arugula sends up a flower stalk and stops producing usable leaves. In full sun, arugula can bolt within 3 to 4 weeks of planting in warm weather. In shade, that window extends to 8 weeks or more. More time harvesting, better flavor while you do. Arugula is the clearest case on this list where shade is not the backup option, it is the better option. 2 to 3 hours of morning light is sufficient. Direct afternoon sun should be avoided entirely in spring and summer. Vegetable 5. Swiss chard, the most visually striking shade crop in existence. There is a practical argument for Swiss chard in shade, and then there is the aesthetic argument. Let's start with the practical one. Swiss chard is one of the most heat-tolerant leafy crops available, significantly more so than lettuce, spinach, or arugula. It can handle warm temperatures without immediately bolting. But in full afternoon sun, the large, thin leaves can scorch, developing brown, papery edges that reduce both the yield and the visual appeal of the plant. In partial shade, those large leaves stay intact. The plant channels its energy into leaf production rather than heat stress management. The result is a more consistent, more abundant harvest over a longer season. 3 to 4 hours of light is the minimum for good Swiss chard production. Morning sun with afternoon shade is the ideal arrangement. Now the aesthetic argument, and this one matters for how gardens actually get used. Rainbow chard with its vivid red, orange, yellow, white, and pink stems is one of the most visually striking plants you can grow. In a shaded corner that might otherwise feel dark and visually heavy, a bed of rainbow chard brings extraordinary color without requiring direct sun to achieve it. Beautiful and productive in the same space that previously produced nothing. That combination is rare in gardening. Take it when you find it.
Vegetable 6. Cilantro coriander. The herb that full sun turns to seed in 3 weeks. Cilantro is widely regarded as a difficult herb to grow. People plant it, it bolts almost immediately into feathery seed-producing stems, and they conclude it's too finicky to bother with. Almost always, the problem is light, not technique. Cilantro bolts faster in response to heat and intense light than almost any herb in common cultivation. In full sun during warm weather, the plant can complete its entire leaf production phase and begin bolting within 2 to 3 weeks of germination. That window is often too short to get a meaningful harvest. In partial shade, the same plant stays in its leafy, harvestable phase for 6 to 8 weeks or longer. The reduced light intensity slows the biological clock that triggers flowering. For anyone who has ever said, "I can't grow cilantro," this is almost certainly why, and the fix is simply moving it to a shadier location. 2 to 3 hours of morning light is ideal. Sow successively a new small batch every 2 to 3 weeks, and your shaded bed produces continuous cilantro through the cooler seasons, without the frustrating 3-week bolt cycle that defeats most growers. One additional benefit, cilantro allowed to fully bolt produces coriander seed, a completely different culinary spice from the same plant. Let a few plants go to seed deliberately in your shade bed. Harvest the seeds when they turn from green to beige. You have now grown 2 distinct ingredients from one planting. Vegetable 7. Sorrel. Plant it once, harvest it for 5 years. This is the one I promised you, 5 years of harvests from a single planting. Sorrel, Rumix acetosa, is a perennial leafy vegetable. Unlike every other plant on this list, it does not need to be replanted each season. Once established in your shade bed, it returns every spring without any intervention. It spreads gradually into a larger, more productive clump with each passing year, and it begins producing edible leaves earlier in spring than almost any other vegetable in the garden, often before the last frost is passed. The flavor is unlike anything else in the kitchen garden.
Sharp, lemony, acidic sorrel brings a brightness to soups, sauces, and salads that no other leaf provides. It's been a staple of French cuisine for generations, forming the base of the classic sorrel soup, and features prominently in Eastern European cooking as well. In full sun and heat, sorrel bolts become very bitter, and its leaf quality drops sharply. In partial shade, it stays productive and palatable through a much longer season. Shade is genuinely the better environment for this plant, not a compromise. 2 to 3 hours of indirect light is sufficient for good sorrel production. Plant once in a well-prepared shaded bed and then largely leave it alone. Divide the clump every 3 to 4 years to maintain vigor. 5 years of food from one act of planting in a shaded corner. This is the most efficient crop on this list by a significant margin. Vegetable 8. Peas. Peas are a cool season crop. They need relatively cold conditions to establish and produce well, and they fail fast once summer heat arrives. Most gardeners plant them in full sun in spring. Reasonable in theory, but it creates a specific problem. As the pea plants are climbing and beginning to flower in late spring, the same full sun position that encouraged early growth starts driving soil temperatures up rapidly. The production window shortens. Flowering and pod set are disrupted by the rising heat, and yields disappoint. In a position with morning sun and afternoon shade or dappled light throughout the day, peas establish just as effectively in spring, but the afternoon protection significantly extends their productive window. Soil stays cooler, flowering continues longer, pod set is more reliable. The additional benefit, pea vines are climbing plants. Give them a simple trellis or fence in your shaded space, and they use the vertical dimension, the same underused airspace above a shaded bed that most gardeners ignore entirely. The shade-producing structure that creates your shaded space often provides the vertical support the peas need simultaneously. The fence creating the shade becomes the trellis. One structure, two functions. This is efficient gardening. Sow directly in early spring as soon as soil can be worked. Harvest pods young for the sweetest flavor. Overripe peas starch up quickly. Expect 4 to 6 weeks of productive harvest in the right shaded position. Vegetable 9. Asian greens, bok choy, tatsoi, mizuna. These 3 Asian greens are grouped together for a specific reason. They share nearly identical shade tolerance, nearly identical growing requirements, and can be grown in the same bed simultaneously for a continuous mix of textures and flavors. Bok choy's crisp stalks, tatsoi's flat rosette, and mizuna's feathery mustard-edged leaves. All 3 prefer cool conditions. All 3 bolt rapidly in heat and full sun, and all 3 produce their most tender, most flavorful leaves in partial shade, where soil temperatures stay lower and light intensity is reduced. Tatsoi in particular is extraordinarily shade adapted. It produces satisfactorily in as little as 2 hours of indirect light per day, making it one of the few vegetables that can be grown in genuinely deep partial shade, rather than just dappled or morning-only light. Grow all 3 together in a single shaded bed. Harvest outer leaves continuously from each plant. The visual variety and the bed's different heights, textures, and growth forms makes the space as interesting to look at as it is productive. For cooking, all 3 perform in stir-fries, soups, braised preparations, and as fresh salad greens when young. 3 distinct ingredients, 1 shaded growing space, 1 continuous harvest through spring and autumn. Vegetable 10. Miner's lettuce, Claytonia. This is the plant I saved for last, and if you've never grown it, you're about to wonder why. Miner's lettuce, Claytonia perfoliata, is not a lettuce despite its common name. It's a cool season annual native to Western North America, where it grows naturally in shaded woodland and canyon habitats. It evolved specifically to thrive in low-light, cool conditions, not to tolerate them, but to prefer them over any alternative. The name comes from the California Gold Rush era, when miners who had no access to fresh vegetables gathered and ate it from the shaded ground around streams and canyon edges. For some, it was the primary fresh plant food available through long winters. The leaves are mild, succulent, and slightly sweet, reminiscent of a gentle lettuce with a slight mineral note. Entirely edible raw or lightly cooked, high in vitamin C. In a shaded garden bed, miner's lettuce will self-sow freely once established, producing new plants each season without any intervention. A single planting becomes a self-sustaining ground cover of edible leaves. 2 hours of indirect light is sufficient for full production. It is the most shade-adapted edible plant on this list by design rather than adaptation. No other crop will perform as reliably in the darkest corners of your garden. If you have a spot that receives almost no direct light at all, this is where you start.
That shaded corner you walked past every season? 10 vegetables that want to grow there. Some of them produce better there than they ever would in your sunniest bed. One of them will feed you for 5 years from a single planting. One of them has been thriving in shaded gardens for centuries, surviving conditions that the crops you've been carefully tending in full sun could never handle. Shade is not the problem. It never was. It was always the growing space you hadn't found the right plants for yet. Tell me in the comments which of these 10 are you trying first, and what's in your shadiest spot right now? Empty ground, weeds, or something else entirely? Drop it below. I read every one. If someone you know has been looking at a shaded corner and calling it useless, send them this video, because what's in it changes how they see that space, permanently. Subscribe, because every week, this channel covers what actually works in real gardens with real conditions, including the imperfect ones that nobody else wants to talk about. See you in the next one.